but it's something that's very few and far between. When you find somebody that is ahead of you in something, most people that are looking to do something, they just don't do anything with the information that they get. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Let's talk through how to get your first real estate deal. And I'm not going to talk through any theory. I'm just going to tell you exactly how I got my first real estate deal. And then I'm actually going to tell you how I got my second as well, because they are two things that I think you can apply if you want to get your first real estate deal. So here's what I did. And I think all of the things that I did are very repeatable. And so if you are looking for your first real estate deal, take a listen. So the very first real estate deal that I got was while I was still working for Target, and I got many years before I left Target. But I started to get into real estate, and someone that I worked with was dating somebody else who was doing real estate full time. So I was just talking with the individual, and this person was doing real estate full time, and I became interested, and I had coffee with him, and we actually had coffee for 4 hours was our first coffee meeting because I was intrigued with what he was doing. And through getting to know him and through understanding what it was that he did, I would say I met with him various times. I can't remember off the top of my head how many times that I met with him, but I would say at least 5 to 10, somewhere in that range. And because he was doing real estate full time, I had a book of notes every time I left a coffee with him or every time I left a meeting with him. And the more that I built a relationship with him, the more I understood how to do it. And because I spent a ton of time with him, because I started to build a relationship, there actually got to a point in his career where he had there was a time when he bought too many projects all at the same time. And we were talking about me getting my first deal. And so he was like, hey, I tell you what, I have this one house that I'm probably not going to get to for a while. You just want to buy it. And so I ended up buying it. And here's what I think you can take away from that. One of the first things that you can do if you're trying to buy your first real estate deal is to put yourself around people who are regularly doing real estate deals. And there's a few ways that I think you can do that. I didn't just ask this guy if he would be gracious with his time and then just continue to, suck all of his knowledge out of him and suck all of his time out of him. And he was completely fine with that. I think a couple things that I did within that relationship that enabled me to continue to meet with him and to have him continue to want to meet with him. And honestly, I think the very first thing, or one of the first or most important principles that led me to continue to be able to meet with him, or that led him to continue to want to meet with me, is every time he gave me a suggestion or every time we talked about something that I could do in order to start to grow a real estate portfolio, I went and I took action on it. And then I would update him on that action. And I think that's a really important, and I would say simple concept, but you would be surprised how few people do it. One of the best ways, or one of the best compliments that you can pay a mentor, is to actually just do the stuff that they tell you to do. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me, whether it's fitness, nutrition, real estate, whatever it might be. They ask me how I did X, and then I would tell them, and then they just wouldn't do the thing. And guess what? I have zero motivation to ever talk to those people again because it's a big waste of my time. And I found that the majority of people that come to me wanting to know how I did something, they take no action. And it's I don't know why. I would suspect that maybe because the things that I share, it's not the easy button, and it's like you actually have to put in some work in order to get results. And I think that's the case in anything that we do. So I am suspecting that that's why the majority of people take no action. But for you, if you're looking to get your first real estate deal, if you can just put yourself around someone that is doing real estate deals all the time, and then when you talk to them, not only do the things that they suggest, but find a way to report back, right? Every time I would take an action, I would shoot him a text, or I would tell him next time that we met, I would say, hey, just a heads up, we talked about this. I wanted to let you know this is what I got done. Here's the outcome that I had. And it was really beneficial. I think he appreciated that everything that he talked with me about, I just went and I did it. Right. So it sounds very simple, but it's something that's very few and far between. When you find somebody that is ahead of you in something, most people that are looking to do something, they just don't do anything with the information that they get. And being in those shoes before, from somebody that comes and asks me how to do something, and then I tell them, I really have no desire to talk to people that I tell them what to do and they just don't do anything with it. So I think that's the first aspect of that. The second thing that I think led him to continue to want to meet with me, he is a huge bourbon aficionado. And so I didn't have anything in terms of knowledge that I could share with him that would be value to his real estate business. I mean, I was working for a big company, and there might have been some very small operational stuff that I could give him that might help his operation out. But otherwise, there wasn't a lot I had of value that I could bring to him in his specific real estate business. But I knew he loved bourbon. And I mean, when we're talking a bourbon aficionado, he's got an entire room full of hundreds of bottles of bourbon. Then hundreds is not an exaggeration. And so guess what I did every time I met with him? I just took him a bottle of bourbon. I had the ability to do that. And so I knew he enjoyed it. And he never asked, he never solicited for that. But I wanted something that I could bring to the table to add value to his life, to at least make him not feel like it was a complete waste of his time for doing that. And so I determined at the time that the value that I could add would be a bottle of bourbon. So I don't know how many bottles of bourbon that I took him, but it was quite a few. He never asked for it. I would just show up and I would just say, hey, I'm super grateful that you're even taking the time to talk to me about this. And so here is a bottle of bourbon. And he was grateful. And he's never told me that that's the reason he kept meeting with me. But I have to think that because I took action on literally everything that he told me, and I gave him a bottle of bourbon every time we talked, at a minimum, he's going to feel okay continuing to meet with me. And what's interesting about that, he is, I would say, one of my best business and personal relationships that I have now. My wife and I hang out with him and his significant other here in Richmond quite a bit. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And he's somebody that has tremendous influence on me as an entrepreneur. He's done some really, really cool things. And so that was the beginning of our relationship. He got me my first real estate deal, but it's blossomed into something even better, because now my real estate career is at the point where we can kind of add value to each other. And he's doing some other business ventures right now as well. But he is somebody where we both feed off of, and we have built a mutual relationship to where we can both add each other some value. And so I think that's the first thing that you can do if you want your first real estate deal, is to go put yourself around somebody who's regularly doing them, and figure out what value can you add to that relationship, what value can you add to that individual, and be sure that everything that whoever it is that's spending time with you tells you, like, go do it, and don't just do it, but report back. Every time you take an action, send a text, send whatever vehicle of communication that is good for you both. Let the person know that you're taking the action, because there's nothing that feels better than giving someone some advice and then hearing that they took action on that, and then they get the result that you're after because you took action on the thing that they suggested. So that was my very first real estate deal. My second real estate deal, I feel, is worth talking about because I got it after I left Target, and this was the first real estate deal that I got when I started real estate full time, because this too is a very repeatable action that if you have some extra time on your hands, but maybe not as much capital, I think you can do what I'm about to describe to also get your first real estate deal. So what I did is I used a software called PropStream, and Many of you, if you are in the real estate industry, you probably have heard of this software. If you're not in the real estate industry but want to get into the real estate industry, it's a good software that will pull comps for you. It will pull lists for you. It will do some skip tracing. It will give you information and a lot of data about the real estate in the area where you're looking to purchase real estate from. So I pulled lists within PropStream. When I say list, when you can pull real estate lists like, hey, show me every house in X zip code that the owner has at least 30 to 40% equity. And PropStream will be able to tell when was the mortgage put on the house, and based on what the house is worth, an estimate of what the house is worth now, an estimate of how much mortgage is left on the house, then the software would be able to calculate an equity number. And so I would pull that list, and that would generate, hundreds of phone numbers or hundreds of addresses. Then I would skip trace those addresses. Skip trace just means I have an address, but I don't know who owns the home or their contact information. Most of that stuff, or I'll rephrase, a lot of that information is of public record. And so you could plug it into a skip tracing software where I plug an address in and it spits out who owns it and an estimate of their contact information. And so I did that with a few different lists, right? I think I pulled 30 to 40% equity, which is on the lower side. You could actually pull a higher equity if you want sellers who are probably going to be even more likely to sell their home. And I think I pulled a couple other lists. I would suggest you could just search on YouTube, what are the best lists to pull in real estate? And there might be stuff like tax liens, foreclosure notices, code enforcement type notices, any of those types of lists. So much of real estate, all of that data is public information, and you could just go pull the list. And so when I pulled those lists, I had hundreds and hundreds of phone numbers after I skip traced the addresses of those lists. And I just started making phone calls. And I don't remember how many hundreds of phone calls that I made, but it was quite a few. And out of the hundreds of phone calls that I made, I think I talked to a very small handful, probably less than 5 actual people that showed interest in selling their house. One of which I went out and met with, and it happened to be someone that had a HomeVestors franchise, which for those of you in real estate know who HomeVestors is. If you have ever been driving on a highway and you see those "We Buy Ugly Houses" signs, those are by the company HomeVestors, and HomeVestors is essentially a franchise that you can purchase into. And the HomeVestors franchise will give you leads, it'll give you marketing, they kind of support you. And I found a franchise owner of a HomeVestors for a property, and it just so happened that he had too much going on. And the house was $68,000 at the time. And back in 2021, I mean, $68,000, you might be cheap, but even in this specific area, this was prior to significant COVID appreciation, I would say. Like that house I probably wouldn't get for $68,000 today. But he had too many projects going on, and I built a really good relationship with him. And he was probably in his 60s. And somebody else that I could tell that if I just absorbed the information from him and I took action and I reported back, I could tell it made him feel good about that. And so we did that a few times. I learned a lot about his personal life. He had just had a wife that passed. I showed genuine interest in who he was. And long story short, this house I ended up putting in contract. I ended up purchasing it. I purchased it with the intent to renovate and then rent it out. And I actually ended up flipping it. But that lead came from a random list that I pulled using PropStream and just making hundreds of phone calls. And I found somebody that wanted to sell. And there's no reason why you can't do the same. I think I bought that house in March, maybe, of 2021. And I started investing full time in January of 2021. So it took me a couple months, right, to even close on it. So if that gives you an idea as far as time frame and how long it took. And that's exactly what I did to get my 2 first real estate deals. And I think that's something that's very repeatable. If you are interested in getting your first real estate deal, I'll add one thing, and I also did this. It wasn't how I got my first or my second real estate deal, but it's how I got my third. I had capital and I paid to join a mastermind, and I joined that mastermind, and they showed me the processes and systems to acquire properties at a much faster rate than what I was doing. And so I learned to replace the time that I was spending with more leveraged activities that were going to get me more properties at scale. And from the time that I joined that mastermind, over the course of the following 12 months, I bought 25 houses, right? So those are 3 things that you can do in order to get your first deal. All of them are great. I don't think it's a matter of trying to figure out which direction or which thing that you want to pick first. Go do all of them. The point is that you put in a tremendous amount of work, you put in a tremendous amount of repetitions, and if you do all of those things, you'll get your first deal. So that's how I got my first 3 deals, and I hope that was helpful for you guys to hear if you guys are interested in getting your first real estate deal. But that's what I got. Thank you guys for listening, and until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.